Alan dragged his suitcase down the narrow hallway of his new dorm, beads of sweat forming on his forehead from the effort. It wasn't exactly the grand, comfortable room he had imagined when he thought of college, but it would do. The faded beige walls, an old wooden desk in each corner, and two twin beds with identical blue covers were unremarkable. He let out a sigh, plopping his bag on the bed nearest the window. "Hey," came a voice from the doorway, startling Alan. He turned to see a guy standing there, tall and lean, wearing a loose hoodie with faded jeans. His messy black hair fell slightly into his eyes, and his relaxed smile immediately gave off a vibe of effortless coolness. "You must be my new roommate. I'm Micah, but everyone just calls me MC. "Alan," he replied stiffly, extending a hand. Micah grinned and gave him a firm handshake. For the first few weeks, things were smooth between them. They respected each other's space, traded occasional jokes, and stayed out of each other's way. Alan was the studious type, often buried in books or typing essays late into the night. MC, on the other hand, was more laid back, coming and going as he pleased, hanging out with friends and blasting music with his headphones on. But then, one night, Alan overheard a phone conversation that left him reeling. Micah was sprawled out on his bed, phone to his ear, laughing at something someone had said. "No, I'm serious, Danny," Micah chuckled. "I think I've got the worst gaydar in the world. I spent weeks crushing on a straight guy. Can you believe it?" Alan froze mid-typing. The word echoed in his head. "Gay?" He quickly turned back to his laptop, pretending to be engrossed in his work. But his focus was gone, replaced by a growing unease. Micah was gay? How had he not noticed? The next morning, Alan couldn't take it anymore. As Micah brewed his coffee in the corner, humming to himself, Alan set his notebook down with more force than necessary. "Can I ask you something?" Alan said, voice tight. Micah turned, raising an eyebrow. "Sure. What's up? Why didn't you tell me you were gay?" Alan's voice was accusatory, his arms crossed. Micah blinked, surprised by the bluntness. "I didn't realize I had to make an announcement about it," he said slowly, setting his mug down. "It's not exactly the first thing people bring up when they meet someone." "Well, I don't believe in that lifestyle," Alan said sharply. "I don't think it's right." Micah's expression didn't waver, though there was a flicker of something in his eyes. Hurt, perhaps? He took a deep breath, his tone calm. "Okay, that's how you feel. I can't change your beliefs. But let me ask you something, Alan. Do you honestly think I'm sitting here trying to convert you? Or that every gay man you meet is automatically going to hit on you? Get over yourself." Alan's face reddened. "That's not what I—" "Look," Micah interrupted, his voice firm now. "I'll make it easy for you. You want to move out? Fine. I won't stop you. But before you go, do me a favor. Stop lumping every gay person into some stereotype you've got in your head. I'm not the boogeyman." Alan didn't respond. He didn't know what to say. He just nodded curtly and left the room, slamming the door behind him. For the next week, Alan kept his distance. He avoided small talk, stayed out late at the library, and even started searching for new accommodations. But moving wasn't as easy as he thought, and to his annoyance, Micah didn't seem particularly bothered by the tension. If anything, he acted completely normal, humming while he cooked, laughing at memes on his phone, and going about his life as if nothing had changed. Then one evening, as Alan was sitting on his bed scrolling through his phone, he noticed Micah glance over. "Still planning to move out?" Micah asked casually. "Yes," Alan replied tersely. "Good luck with that." Micah's tone was light, but there was a hint of sarcasm that Alan couldn't ignore. "In the meantime, why don't you try watching me? You're so convinced I'm whatever you think I am. Observe me. See if I live up to all your weird fears." "I don't have fears," Alan shot back. "I just don't agree with it." "Right?" Micah said, rolling his eyes. "Because disagreeing with something you know nothing about makes total sense." Alan glared at him, but for once he didn't have a snappy reply. Over the next few weeks, something strange began to happen. Alan couldn't help but notice little things about Micah. How he was always the first to offer help when someone needed it. How he listened intently when their mutual friends vented about their problems. How he had this easy confidence about him, unapologetically himself, no matter what anyone thought. One night, Alan found himself sitting at the kitchen table with Micah after dinner. He wasn't even sure how it had happened. They'd started talking about classes, then professors, then random topics like their favorite TV shows. For the first time in weeks, Alan laughed, a real, genuine laugh, at one of Micah's jokes. It startled him how easy it felt. "You're not what I expected," Alan admitted, almost to himself. Micah raised an eyebrow. "What did you expect? Rainbow flags everywhere? Glitter on everything?" Alan smirked despite himself. "Something like that." "Well, sorry to disappoint." Micah grinned. "I'm just a regular guy who happens to like other guys." Shocking, I know. As time went on, Alan found it harder to cling to his initial judgments. He even stopped looking for a new place. Instead, he found himself spending more and more time with Micah, whether it was playing video games, grabbing coffee, or just hanging out in their dorm. Slowly but surely, his walls began to crumble. But Micah noticed something odd. Alan was still guarded in a way that felt different from before. It wasn't hostility anymore. It was something else, something almost nervous. One day, as they were walking back from the campus cafe, Micah decided to confront him. "Hey, Alan, can I ask you something?" "Sure," Alan said, stuffing his hands into his pockets. "Are you interested in me?" Alan froze. "What? No. That's crazy." Micah tilted his head, studying him. "You sure? Because you're acting kind of weird, like you're scared of something. Or maybe jealous. Or maybe," his eyes narrowed, "maybe you're scared because you're starting to like how I live. Like you're afraid it says something about you." Alan's face burned. "That's not true." "Then prove it," Micah challenged. "Spend a day with me. See what it's like. If you're so confident that you're not into this side of the world, as you call it, it shouldn't bother you. Unless, of course, it does." Alan hesitated, his pride and fear warring inside him. Finally, he nodded. "Fine." That weekend, Alan followed Micah to a brunch with some of his friends, all of whom were openly LGBTQ. At first, Alan was stiff and uncomfortable, but as the meal went on, he found himself relaxing. They were funny, kind, and welcoming, teasing Micah about his terrible sense of humor and swapping embarrassing stories from college parties. By the end of the day, Alan realized they weren't so different from his own friends. But something deeper was stirring inside him, a weight on his chest that he couldn't quite name. One night, after a particularly wild night out with Micah and his friends, Alan stumbled into their dorm, drunk and giggling. Micah was right behind him, catching Alan before he tripped over his own. "Careful there," Micah said, steadying him. Alan looked up at him, his face flushed. "Why are you so comfortable with who you are?" he slurred. Micah blinked, taken aback. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Alan struggled to find the words. "You don't care what people think. You're just you." "I don't know how to do that." Micah stared at him, realization dawning. "Alan, are you trying to tell me something?" For a moment, Alan didn't respond. Then, in a rush of emotion, he blurted out, "I think I might be like you." Micah's expression softened. He sat down beside Alan, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Hey," he said gently. "It's okay. You don't have to figure it all out right now." But Alan shook his head, tears welling up in his eyes. "I've been so afraid of it, Micah. Afraid of what it means, of what people will think." Micah pulled him into a hug, holding him as he cried. "It's scary, I know, but you're not alone in this. You don't have to do it all at once." The next morning, sunlight streamed through the dorm window, piercing through Alan's groggy haze. He groaned, squinting at the clock, then sat up with a start as last night's memories flooded back. He looked over at Micah, who was sitting on his bed, headphones on, scrolling through his phone. For a moment, Alan considered saying nothing, pretending it hadn't happened. But when Micah glanced up and smiled faintly, Alan's chest tightened with unease. "Hey," Micah said, his voice casual but careful, like he was testing the waters. "How are you feeling after last night?" Alan's face reddened. About last night, he rubbed the back of his neck, looking anywhere but at Micah. I was drunk, okay? I didn't mean any of it." Micah's expression didn't change, but there was a subtle shift in his eyes, something guarded. "Drunk words are sober thoughts, Alan." "Not in this case," Alan snapped, more defensive than he meant to be. He stood abruptly and grabbed his bag. I don't want to talk about it. It was stupid. Micah watched him leave, sighing softly to himself. It wasn't the first time someone had tried to bury their truth, and he knew it wouldn't be the last. But something about Alan felt different. He wasn't just fighting himself, he was fighting the world around him. Micah decided to dig deeper. Over the next week, Micah started tagging along with Alan more often, slipping into his routine like it was no big deal. He joined him for lunch, hung out with his study group, and even sat with him during lectures. At first, Alan was visibly annoyed, but he didn't outright tell Micah to leave. Whether it was guilt or something else, Alan couldn't say no. That's when Micah started noticing things. Alan's friends weren't overtly hostile, but there was a subtle edge to their humor. They'd crack jokes about rainbow people or make snide comments about flamboyant guys they saw on campus. They laughed it off, insisting it was all in good fun, but the atmosphere left Micah feeling uneasy. He realized this environment had shaped Alan's mindset and his fears. One day, Micah overheard something that made everything click. "Dude, if my sister wasn't family, I'd totally disown her," one of Alan's friends, Mark, joked. "Can you imagine? A lesbian? It's like a nightmare for our family." The others laughed, and Alan chuckled along, though it sounded forced. Micah's jaw tightened. He later asked around through a mutual friend and found out that Mark's sister, Lucy, was indeed gay, and she was fiercely protective of her identity. Micah decided to reach out to her. Lucy was tall, with a no-nonsense attitude and a sharp tongue. When Micah told her about Mark's comments and Alan's situation, she rolled her eyes so hard it looked painful. "Mark's an idiot," she said bluntly. "He and his friends think they're funny, but they don't realize how much damage they do. Do you think you could talk to him?" Micah asked. Lucy smirked. "Oh, I'll do more than talk. Give me a few days." True to her word, Lucy confronted Mark. At first, Mark was defensive, insisting it was all a joke, but Lucy didn't let up. She dragged him to meet Micah, forcing Mark to see the harm his so-called humor had caused. "It's not that deep," Mark muttered, crossing his arms. "It is deep," Lucy shot back. "People like you make it harder for people like me to just exist. You don't see the weight of your words because they don't affect you." Mark hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. Finally, he sighed. "Fine, I get it. I'll stop." Lucy turned to Micah. "And don't worry, Mark's coming with me to fix this. I got a plan." The plan came together on a Friday night when Alan and his friends decided to hit a popular downtown bar. Lucy had orchestrated everything behind the scenes, making sure Micah and his friends would be there too. It was all designed to push Alan to a breaking point. The bar was packed, music thumping as people danced and drank. Alan and his friends were laughing, taking shots at the bar, when Mark froze mid-drink. Guys?" Mark said, nodding toward a table across the room. "Is that, oh my God, it's Micah and his crew." Alan followed his gaze, his stomach sinking. There was Micah, surrounded by his friends, laughing and enjoying himself like he didn't have a care in the world. "Of course he'd be here," one of Alan's friends muttered. "This place is practically a gay hot spot." Mark, emboldened by the group, smirked. "Hey, Alan, why don't you go say hi? Or are you too scared?" The others laughed, egging him on. "Yeah, go ahead, man. Show him who's boss." Alan forced a weak smile, his pulse racing. He glanced at Micah, who was watching the scene unfold with an unreadable expression. Alan felt like he was suffocating. As the group's taunts grew louder, one of them called out to Micah's table. "Hey, shouldn't you guys be at a drag show or something?" Micah's friends tensed, but Micah remained calm, his eyes fixed on Alan. "Come on, Alan," Mark urged. "Back me up." Something inside Alan snapped. "Shut up," he said sharply, his voice cutting through the noise. His friends stared at him in shock. Alan turned to face them fully, his fists clenched. "Do you even hear yourselves? Do you know how pathetic you sound?" "Whoa, man," Mark said, holding up his hands. "We're just joking." "Well, it's not funny," Alan shot back. His voice wavered, but he pressed on. "It's not funny, and it's not okay. You're not better than them, and you sure as hell aren't better than Micah." The group fell silent, stunned. Alan took a shaky breath and turned toward Micah. "And for the record," he said, his voice quieter now, "I'm gay, and I like Micah." The room seemed to hold its breath. Then Lucy's voice broke the tension. "About time," she said, grinning from ear to ear. Alan blinked, confused, as Micah's friends burst into laughter. Even Micah was smiling, shaking his head. "What's going on?" Alan asked. Micah stepped forward, placing a hand on Alan's shoulder. "It was a setup," he admitted. "Lucy, Mark, and I planned the whole thing. We wanted to help you see the truth." Alan's jaw dropped. "You what?" Lucy crossed her arms, smirking. "Consider it tough love." Later that night, after the group had dispersed and the bar had quieted down, Alan and Micah walked back to their dorm together. The cool night air was a welcome relief after the chaos of the evening. "I can't believe you pulled that stunt," Alan said, though there was no real anger in his voice. Micah shrugged, smiling. "You needed a push." They stopped outside their building, and Alan hesitated. Then, without warning, he pulled Micah into a tight hug. Micah froze for a moment, then relaxed, wrapping his arms around Alan. "What's this for?" he asked softly. "Payback," Alan murmured, his voice thick with emotion as he picked Micah up and walked towards the bedroom. "For everything," Micah chuckled. "I think I'll let this one slide." And as the lights went off, Alan finally felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. Free and loved.